Last episode, we started to build our first residential and commercial settlements. We got ourselves some low-density housing along here with a beautiful little town square right in the middle. Along the other side of the highway, to complement our residential complex, we developed a beautiful commercial street right along our waterfront. Not forgetting a cycle path, not forgetting a pedestrian path, making sure we are adding bushes and all sorts of details to make our map as beautiful as possible. However, there is one very important thing that we did not tackle in the last episode. It's quite the elephant in the room, but it is our immense industrial demand that is not currently being met. Especially considering that nearly 60% of our inhabitants right now are unemployed. And so we're going to zoom out a little bit. We're going to shift along to this next island along our chain, and we're going to build ourselves a beautiful industrial complex. If beautiful is what you would describe an industrial complex to be, obviously. Now, we are very much blessed by the wind direction going in this direction away from our map right now, which means we can build as much industry as possible without having to worry. I don't know if you guys saw a second ago, but we do have groundwater deposits here. However, we are most definitely not going to be building any form of water tower along here today, considering the immense ground pollution we're going to be seeing. We have got ourselves our sewage outlet here, which seems to be doing a very nice job at, well, for the time being, not dirtying our pristine water too much, which is very, very good. However, let's get straight into it. We're actually going to get rid of all of these electricity pylons because they're kind of annoying me. We're going to stick them underground instead. And we have to think about how we are going to do this as efficiently and effectively as possible. We've got our highway going straight through here. I don't really want to divert it because it's going to be very pricey. And I think this long straight road will serve as a very nice access point for our industrial services. Considering how many kinds of like trucks and lorries and vans are going to be coming along here, I do think a 4-lane road is absolutely justified here. Maybe we get a divider along the way as well, just to make sure any kinds of like sneaky U-turns are not happening, and we can bring this all the way down here. For industrial buildings themselves, we don't really need massive roads, and so maybe all we need are a few alleyways, and we can just start to build ourselves some pretty boring but standard and reliable grids along here. Maybe we can add some boring old cul-de-sacs to the end of these just for some variety in style, and maybe we could add ourselves a small roundabout at the end here to allow trucks and lorries and vans and all sorts of things to do some U-turns around here if they need to. I think we're going to stick to a very similar structure along here as well, with these long roads coming out along here. Maybe we could do a little tiered system this time. I don't really know how effective that's going to be. We can bring ourselves another road up along here to add some divisions, and I think this is going to work pretty well. All we need to do is actually start putting industry in now. So how about we go one tile in depth here, so this main road isn't actually getting saturated with industrial buildings, and we can fill out this first grid to start off with. And my goodness, they are spawning in like wildfire. We're starting to get this reduction in demand. However, I think it's going to probably stay up significantly for a while. Just making sure that underground now we connect all of the cables that are going to be needed, like our power, and then also our sewage and water we have to connect up, and those industrial buildings seem a lot happier now. Whilst we're working on this though, and these things start to spawn in, there's another very important thing that we have to consider, guys, and that is rubbish, or as they call it in this game, garbage. We're going to have to get ourselves a landfill site. Now, landfill sites are absolutely immense. They are huge. And now that I look at this, I might have made a bit of a mistake by building all of this out. And that is because we need a pretty big plot of land for landfill. And I think our industrial island will probably be one of the best places to do so. So I'm actually going to get rid of these roads. We're going to keep this grid here for our industrial buildings in the future. However, this area here, I think we're actually going to commit to landfill. So what we can do is draw a little dirt road along here. A dirt road is all we need for this right now. We're going to drop down a landfill site, and we're going to make sure that we don't like make this big of a site, and we don't want it to go too near the water either, because I don't want things starting to leak in, especially on rainy days where you can get some leaching. Although, to be fair, we've got our sewage outlet here, so I think this whole area here is going to be pretty polluted anyways. But we're going to do our bit for the environment where we can, and we're just going to connect this up a little bit like this. And maybe we can build ourselves a little path that goes directly around this landfill site. I guess maybe as a bit of a perimeter to kind of distance anyone from getting too close, because I guess it's going to be completely riddled with hazardous materials. So that kind of makes sense. And I think for our people actually entering the city, it makes sense that we build up the density of trees in this area just a little bit, so they're not getting directly exposed to all of this pollution. Maybe we bring a few trees along here as well, just so anyone traveling along the water also don't have to put up with the terrible eyesore that this landfill site is. And I think that's looking pretty nice so far. Maybe we could also get some props out, maybe a safety barrier. This would be quite a useful thing to actually have along this road, right along our highway path to this junction. I think this will look pretty nice. And although obviously it doesn't actually physically stop anyone from coming in, I think it's a nice little division line, kind of stops people from maybe considering going along here. And if they really want to, then there is still like a wall, I guess, kind of stopping them from that. But I think that's looking pretty nice so far. We've still got ourselves loads and loads of industrial demand. So we are going to start building on this entire grid here. Seeing that demand start to drop down again. It's still staying pretty high though. So I don't see why we can't go all the way down here now and build all the way along down to our cul-de-sacs here. I have no idea what's going to spawn at the end of these weird cul-de-sacs. Maybe warehouses, hopefully nothing too polluting right along our coastline. And I think that's going to look pretty nice for the time being. That being said, we do have ourselves loads of residential demand now, both in low and medium density. So let's get back onto that. However, first we do have to consider power. Looking at this, our wind turbines here are getting absolutely overloaded, which I'm not surprised about because industrial buildings do take a lot of energy, especially considering we've got landfill now. So if we take a look at energy, we do have ourselves the option to have a small coal power plant. I am very, very tempted to build this, especially considering we've got ourselves kind of like a polluting island here. It would kind of make sense to have ourselves a power plant here now, right? However, all we have to do is take a look at these wind turbines. We put them along here and we are producing nearly the maximum capacity, close to 4 megawatts per turbine. Looking at the coal power plant, they're going to be producing 20 megawatts, which means we need 5 small wind turbines to get to that exact same level. 5 times 17,000, which is the price we're going to have to be paying, is less than the 100k that we're going to be paying for a small coal power plant. And there's the added bonus that we're not destroying the environment. So what I'm actually going to do right along here, maybe directly along our coastline actually, is start to construct some wind turbines. We've got the money for it, and I think this is a far cleaner and far nicer way to spend our money to grow our city. And I think this should hopefully alleviate all of the energy pressures that we were having here. They have been alleviated, which is fantastic. And we can now start focusing on some more residential areas. I think this area here will probably be the next best place to do it. I can see actually 4 neighborhoods being able to be constructed from here. We've got one up here, one along here, one here, and one here as well. So how about we zoom out for a second and we buy a few of these tiles? I don't see why we can't buy all 4 of them right now, considering we're wanting to expand a lot this episode. And so maybe the next place to build upon is this lovely big plot of land right here. I think this coastline would be a really nice place to start once again. And unlike last time where I had a cycle path and pedestrian path coming along here, I personally think a quay would be better. Not just a path, but a quay. That's because I feel like this coastline is a little bit steeper and adding some stability to this area will probably be rather beneficial. So we're going to get ourselves a quay that we're going to draw out along here, trying to follow the natural contours of the land. Unlike this other side of our residential area where we actually really made the most of being along the waterfront, I think here we're going to have it more as an afterthought. Maybe when people initially settled here, this was the first development. They made the most of the coastline they had, building the commercial area directly along it. However, perhaps a little bit later on, a wealthy investor, real estate investor, decided to build here, and instead of capitalizing upon the beautiful views you had along here, they actually left it untouched to roads and left it purely as a pedestrian cycle path, and instead started to build directly inland. Considering we've got a fair bit of land here as well, I think it kind of makes sense. Having a 4-lane road straight through here makes a lot of sense, and then branching directly off this road, we get ourselves a support grid, and then running through here, we start to get ourselves a few alleyways. Maybe on this side, we get ourselves a bit more natural suburban sprawl, kind of going into our forest, but not impeding too much into this land, because obviously we want to make the most of all of the nature that's around here. Maybe coming off of this main road, we get ourselves a little dirt path directly down onto our pedestrian road here. We've had some weird clipping, which is really strange because when we hit delete, it kind of disappears. I'd like to think this is now connected. However, part of me really thinks it isn't. I don't actually think it was, so we're going to have to do this. It's a little bit ugly, but it will kind of do the job. Maybe we could have some even smaller roads, a few little alleyways coming down here as well, just making the most of all of this suburban sprawl around here. maybe even getting ourselves a few cul-de-sacs where it makes sense, kind of finishing off all of these roads quite nicely. Now, this is our highway here. What would the best connection be to this area here? I think it would be a standard road. I'm thinking of going for something a little bit more unique here with a 3-lane asymmetric road. And I think this kind of just winding through our forest, eventually getting to this main road over here, will work out pretty nicely, especially if we slap a nice roundabout here and maybe one down here as well. Maybe we could get ourselves a little striped roundabout for the connection with the highway, and I think this should be working pretty nicely. Now, along this main road, I want there to actually be some density, so what I'm thinking of doing is getting ourselves a bit of medium density row homes. We got some North American medium density row homes in our last development we made last episode, so how about we get ourselves some EU versions for this episode, and we can just start filling it all in directly along here. We're going to make sure that we're not going too deep. I think this will work quite nicely. And whilst that's all building in alongside our grid areas around here, we'll get some standard low density homes. Whilst these all build in, I think we should shift our attention to something really quite important. If we take a look here, we're actually getting quite a few complaints for death care because we have not got a single cemetery. And so I think that should be our next priority. If we take a look in the healthcare tab, we've got the option to build a small cemetery or a standard size cemetery. I think we're going to go for a small one right now because the standard one, as well as being absolutely massive, is really quite expensive. Now, I think this little forested area here would actually be a really nice place to put a cemetery in. So what we're going to do is just at a nice angle here, right in the middle of the forest, build ourselves our cemetery. We're going to have a small gravel road, nothing too fancy. That's going to be built all the way around the cemetery like this. We're going to have a small gravel road lead to this roundabout for this neighborhood. And then we're also actually going to have a small gravel road. It's going to go a little bit round the houses through the forests. However, we're eventually going to make our way over to this neighborhood as well. So strictly speaking, if you wanted to go from here over to this neighborhood here, you could actually go via the cemetery, but I'd like to think that most people would go via the main road purely for efficiency. Talking about neighborhoods as well, guys, we have to start thinking about what we want to call this island. We've got 2 islands now, and I'm going to leave it to you in the comments below to decide what you want this island to be called, our first ever residential island, and then also this island, our beautiful industrial area, somehow requiring a hearse in the landfill site. I don't really want to know how that has happened, but oh, and here's our hearse right now. I have no idea who it's going to collect. It doesn't actually say who it's gathering. That would have been quite a cool addition. I don't really know. It's actually going to go inside. Oh, wow. Okay, so it's literally gone inside. And yeah, anyways, going back to what I was saying, guys, before I got too distracted, I want us to be able to name each of these islands as we start to go along. So if you have any ideas, comment below and I will make sure that I choose one of them. Coming back to here, our residential area has grown like wildfire. So we're going to continue with a lot of this low density housing, trying to get as many people in as possible. We're going to try to make this area a little bit more dense than the area we were building and developing last episode, because like I said, in the lore of this village, this is going to be a far newer build, actually constructed with profits in mind from the perspective of the developers, whereas this little area here was more of like an original development that was constructed when the settlers first came here via sea. Looking at our finances, we're not actually doing too well right now. I don't want to be increasing taxes too much because I don't want to be putting people off living here. However, I think it is important that we start to shift them up ever so slightly, just so we start to see ourselves head a little bit closer into the green. And we are already starting to head further towards our break-even line, which is really, really important. As we start to get a bit more demand, we're obviously going to start getting a bit more tax money in so we can start constructing a few more things. That being said, we do still have loads of money, so why don't we start constructing a few more very critical services? I think the next most important thing is going to be fire service, especially considering we've got a fairly big and substantial industrial complex here now. So I think when it comes to actually building a firehouse, it should probably be along the highway somewhere here near our industrial area. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure the firefighters have themselves a nice pretty view of the coastline here whilst they're off duty. So we're going to build ourselves a little dirt path here. We're going to stick a firehouse right along here. And then we're just going to get a little winding road that joins up to this junction here. Maybe it would actually make a lot of sense for us to have a roundabout here, maybe? Or actually, I know what we're going to do. We're going to keep traffic lights here because I think traffic flow into like our industrial area is going to be very important. And I think traffic lights will do a better job at that. But we'll bring our fire service path along here. However, we'll get ourselves a roundabout so traffic management can still be maintained along here. And I personally think where the firehouse is now is actually really quite nice. They're overlooking, well, they're not really overlooking, I guess. They're kind of at eye level with the industrial area. However, they also have a beautiful view of the coastline ahead for when they're off duty, which I think is actually a really nice addition for the firefighters here. And to be honest with you guys, I actually think this is one of the most beautiful industrial areas I've ever had the pleasure of developing in this game. I think the map makes a great big difference because obviously this is a beautiful map, but I think this is actually working really quite nicely. Our residential demand is once again through the roof. And so what we're going to do on this side now of our development is get some waterfront housing. We're going to go for some North American here just to change things up a little bit. And we're going to just satisfy all of the demand by building some waterfront housing along all of this suburban sprawl now. We're not trying to go too deep now into these squares. These tiles are here as guidance, not to maximize all the time because we're building with thought. However, where we do want to add depth, we most definitely can do. And here we are, guys. I think we've satisfied that demand pretty nicely for the time being. However, there's another very important service we have to start considering now, and that is education. Taking a look at our citizens, we have loads of people that could be in elementary school, even more in high school as well. So I think that's the next thing we should be focusing on right now. Now, when it comes to elementary schools, I think this little gap right here has actually been placed perfectly to stick an elementary school into. We're not going to go for a big one. However, a small one here, I think will do a really good job. And so we're going to place it basically backing onto all of these row homes here. And then this alleyway here is just going to lead over onto this roundabout here. And that has done a beautiful job. This elementary school will hopefully be able to serve this entire district here. I think we're definitely going to need to get ourselves an additional one for this residential area here, especially considering we've got some medium density here. So once again, we're going to get ourselves a small elementary school. And I think if we have it backing onto some of these houses here, we could very easily and happily get a path that actually connects to our little central park here and actually gives this road a bit of purpose. So I actually really like this, and maybe we just improve the pedestrian access here a little bit by adding a pathway along here. Now, industrial demand is once again creeping up, so I think it is actually time for us to start making the most of this side of the island now. I'm once again going to make the most of the 4-lane divided road. However, we're going to bring it out here instead now. We're going to get a small concrete roundabout, and from there, we're going to bring a 2-lane road down here. Either side, we're going to have a couple of alleyways. This one is actually going to come up here and then travel all the way along here with a small roundabout here. And we're going to start trying to spawn in some smaller industrial plots. Hopefully, this will allow for some less polluting industries to come in, maybe some more warehouses and things like that. We'll see what happens. I think it'll be very important for these two industrial sites to be connected. So I am actually going to invest in getting ourselves a little bridge here, and we're just going to connect both sides of the industrial area up just like that. With more jobs comes more opportunities, which attracts more people though, which has become very obvious here with our immense demand we have once again developed. And so we're going to start developing a few more residential areas. I think along this coast, we're actually going to make the most of a quay once again, however, a non-pedestrianized one. Along this quay, we're going to have some beautiful shops that are actually going to line it directly. And so I think that's going to work really quite nicely. A slightly larger 4-lane road comes straight down here before joining a roundabout, which will in one direction lead you to one side of the quay, and in the other direction, you'll be taken back to that roundabout. Making sure we've got plenty of car parking spaces along here, obviously, considering this whole area is going to be completely flooded with commercial. Considering this is going to be the end of the highway, I don't see why we can't just let it morph into this road, especially if we have a pretty little roundabout here. And maybe from this roundabout, we can have another road branch off that then eventually takes us over here, which could give us a nice little residential area. So if we start sticking in some low density business along the seafront here, and then leading up from our commercial area, we can get some medium density housing, considering we've got demand for it. We'll start off with some larger plots, and then as we get a little bit closer to the main road, they start to get a little bit smaller, a little bit lower. I think it'll start to look pretty nice. And then along here, a little bit of low density housing, considering we have got quite a bit of demand for it right now. And I think this long road that then leads to this shopping area, I'm going to kind of leave empty for the time being. I don't see why we can't create a pretty little road lined with trees as a warm welcome into this area. Maybe in this little area here, we once again have a very small little park area that doesn't really lead to anywhere, but maybe still has a few pretty little things, maybe like a little concert gazebo, a few food stalls, just like a nice little area that maybe the local inhabitants come to every once in a while with their friends. And maybe we add a nice little sand surface texture in here. I think this looks quite nice. And the next best thing you can always do with these kinds of things is then just add in like loads of trees around here so the texture doesn't look so abrupt when it comes to like the borders. And I think that's actually quite nice. It's kind of worked out a lot nicer than I was expecting, so I'm very happy with that. Maybe from these houses up here, they can have themselves a direct path to it, because otherwise it's quite the walk for them. Residential demand once again is up and running though, so what we should do in this area, I think, is have a bit of a pedestrianised community. Maybe considering that this was the old town, and then they started to develop this here, they created a slightly more luxurious area here. Very grid-based, very methodical, however, very pedestrianised as well. Maybe these pedestrianised residents will have themselves a lovely stroll right along the coast here, with a pretty town square along here, plenty of parking that we can very conveniently connect up via these two roundabouts, and then the rest is literally just grid-based. Pure pedestrianisation at its finest here. Making sure we get some very upmarket European waterfront housing that we can completely saturate all of these grids with, before then adding in a few small pedestrian streets along here, making sure we take out the zoning from this area here because this was going to be our very pretty central park. And whilst everything starts to spawn in, we can start focusing on this little park. I think a fountain would be a very good centerpiece for sure. Maybe we could get some large fountains at each corner, actually. A few food stalls on this side, perhaps. Benches along here. A small stage for performances. We can mark it all off with a beautiful sand surface. Because this is only the wealthiest that are going to be living here, why don't we get ourselves also a tree-lined path along here so that the inhabitants don't even have to consider the noise pollution coming from this main road, let alone actually hearing it. And we'll actually make it doubly thick just to limit that noise pollution as much as possible. And maybe we'll do the same here along the parking spaces, because I'm sure these people living here would be quite unhappy otherwise about having cars reversing right into their back gardens all the time. Considering we've got a little bit of commercial demand as well, why don't we get rid of this block and we put in a bit of commercial just so the people have themselves a little pharmacy, or, well, I was going to say whatever they really need to survive. It's probably going to be a petrol station knowing this game, but we'll see what happens. We actually have like a little bit of space on this side as well. And what I was thinking, guys, is considering this is quite a small patch of land, what if we did something kind of crazy with this? What I'm thinking, right, is this is the highway, right? This is the highway along here. This is obviously our first island. It's where the settlers originally came when they first came to this entire archipelago. So why don't we have almost like, I wouldn't go as far to say an indigenous tribe, but maybe like some more rural living, I should say. We could get a small gravel road coming off of here that then leads into the forests just a little bit. A few small low density houses, very, very light density. We're not sort of going for any kind of depth right now. Very, very little density for these original settlers that have now kind of become, I don't know, like, I wouldn't say like travelers maybe. I don't know how I'd describe it, but maybe this is kind of where those original settlers were, and some of the descendants have decided to stay off the grid. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say, like off-grid livers. Off-grid living, that is exactly what I'm trying to say. So how about we get an apple tree? I've never seen these before. What if these guys that live here, these off-the-grid settlers, actually live off of the apple trees that they cultivate and grow? How about that? So why don't we just get ourselves loads and loads of apple trees all amongst here? And like I said, maybe that is what they choose to farm instead of going to the industry to work, or the offices, or wherever else. Maybe around the place there could be like some makeshift tents as well. But I know once we actually unlock the Parks and Recreation milestone, we can actually get a campsite, and maybe this would be quite a nice area to have a campsite in as well. And you know something, guys, I'm actually so happy that as we approach the end of this episode, we see some real progress, not just with our population, but looking at the financial metrics as well. It's not a load of money, but we are in the green right now. We're making profit, solid, clean profit for the first ever time, coming to the end of episode 2 now, which I'm so happy with. Just taking a look at what we have developed over the last couple of episodes, I think we have made some really good progress. I mean, starting off with our original settlement here, with our beautiful commercial land skirting along the coastline here, with our small, very sparsely populated suburbia along here, with our brand new elementary school, water tower as well, the first ever water tower of this city, leading onto this beautiful park. We've got a cyclist here, very, very nice. What do you think this cyclist's called? Do you think they've got a name? Her name is Jane. Hi Jane, why don't we follow you? Let's add you to our following list and we'll see what happens to you along the way. Anyways, as I was saying, we got to develop ourselves a beautiful central park here, leading on from our elementary school. We then also developed a bit of a new build complex here with some lovely great big row homes lining this big street, before then expanding to some lower density houses, both on the right in a grid form and on the left in a more suburban sprawl form with loads of cul-de-sacs as well. Looking over here, we had ourselves our long tree-lined road leading down to this small community as well. Some nice medium density houses being constructed now alongside these parking spaces, overlooking the waterfront, which I am really happy with. And then turning around to what we have just been working on, this great affluent, what you could call, I guess, a gated community, fully pedestrianized, looking over the beautiful views of the sea once again. And then finally, our off-the-grid living community whose houses are still developing in. Now, next episode, I have a load of ideas. We've built our industry, we've built our residential, we've built our commercial. However, services are still of critical importance and we have so many to still build. We've got ourselves a few more little patches of land along this first island that we should pad out. We're also going to be absolutely overhauling our pedestrian and cycle paths on this island. So make sure you stay tuned for episode 3 because that is all coming next. As always, thank you so very much for watching this episode of Vanilla Shores. We're still very early on in this journey, and so if you haven't hit subscribe yet and you want to continue following this, then make sure you do. Hit the like button because it makes a world of difference to the channel and I'll be forever thankful. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day, happy building, and I will see you all very, very soon.